To the people of Queensland and Australia, I note that this bill makes some useful updates to the administration of the federal government's childcare subsidy. One Nation supports largely those changes. One Nation, though, opposes many of the provisions in the bill. Before moving my amendment, I'll put it in context and ask 4 questions of the Minister, because this bill has not been thought through. Firstly, this bill will add $4.5 billion over forward estimates to the cost of childcare to the federal government, taking the annual cost above $10 billion. Childcare, or early learning, is an industry worth $14 billion a year, employing 133,000 Australians to care for 1.3 million children. The government is promising this bill will make childcare more affordable, and the expectation is to allow more families to put more children in childcare. But it's difficult to see how. Remember, subsidies always make services and goods more expensive. A family earning Australia's median wage of $52,000 will see an increase in the government subsidy from 85% of the cost of childcare to 90% of the cost, just a 5 percentage point increase. At an average cost of $80 a day for a preschool place, this saving will amount to $4 a day. For long day care, around $8 a day. How fast will this benefit be eaten away through inflation? Well, it already has been eaten away. Childcare centres starting putting their prices up straight after Labor's election victory in the expectation of this increase in the government subsidy. As rising energy prices, rising wages, insurance and overheads impact cash flow, childcare centres will raise their prices further. According to a Mitchell University study, childcare was unaffordable for 386,000 Australian families, and this was keeping 73,000 people out of the workforce. What's missing from the explanatory memorandum, the Bills Digest and Committee report, was any proof that making childcare $4 to $8 a day cheaper will have any effect on childcare update. Did anyone ask why these everyday Australians could not afford childcare? Had this question been asked, we would find everyday Australians not only find childcare unaffordable, everyday Australians can no longer afford their electricity bill, their rent, their mortgage payment and weekly grocery bill. Did anyone, Minister, ask if these families could not afford childcare because they can't afford a car to get there or the petrol to go in that car? So my first question, why has the government advanced this bill as a solution to childcare affordability without actually doing the work to prove this bill will make childcare more affordable? What about tax reform to enable families to look after their children, the best form of care? Respect for families and parents. What about the modelling? I'm pretty sure it won't do a damn thing for everyday Australians, this bill. Thanks to the economic policies of the previous Liberal national government, which Labor supported from opposition, inflation is now running at 8%. I've spoken previously about the inflation that has resulted from wasteful COVID spending, funded through increased debt and money creation using electronic journal entries. That's where the problem is. Wages going backward from runaway inflation due to government spending that's already out of control. What does this bill do? It adds another $4.5 billion to government spending. Chair, if everyday Australians are not benefiting from this bill to any useful degree, where's the $4 billion coming from? So figure 1 is a handy chart from the Bills Digest and it's most instructive. The biggest financial benefit in this bill to existing recipients goes to families who are earning $170,000 a year. The biggest winners overall are families earning between $360,000 and $530,000 who did not get childcare subsidy before, yet now will. Does this sound like a measure to help working Australians? No, it does not. To One Nation, it sounds like the government is spending billions to make themselves popular with urban professionals who voted Greens and Teals in the last election. What about rural and regional Australians? Urban professionals are the winners from this bill. Working and regional Australians get scraps. That's a cynical political decision from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Let's turn next, secondly, to One Nation is compelled to raise another issue arising from this legislation. Qualification for free, taxpayer-funded childcare is being based on race rather than need. While we fully support evidence-based measures to improve Aboriginal workforce participation, childcare support should be based on the needs of the individual, not the colour of the individual's skin. Aboriginals and all Australians are worthy of respect and fairness. I support Senator Nampijinpa Price's comments on the definition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. This bill has not been thought through. Third, this bill includes a provision that will have the effect of prohibiting the million or so Australian families using childcare from paying cash for their childcare in cash. By cash, I mean cash or cheque. Australia's 2 million small businesses often deal in cash. Rural Australia still needs cash. Anyone in a flood, a blackout or with a hacked bank account has to pay in cash. Family members help each other out in cash. And yet the globalist billionaires have told Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Minister Stephen Jones to ban cash, and now we have snuck into this bill a provision that all payments made to childcare centres must be made using electronic funds transfer. No cash allowed, Minister. This continues the Liberal Nationals' war against cash. As the Reserve Bank of Australia admitted to me in Senate estimates hearings, that it is working on a CBDC, a central bank digital currency for Australia, and working with other nations' central banks to develop a global digital currency, The predatory billionaire said jump, and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said how high? Now an entire industry worth $14 billion a year can no longer accept cash payment unless the minister writes a specific exemption, which the minister will not write because the whole idea of banning cash payments is to ban cash. There is no reason for this new provision. The King's currency, our national currency, is by law legal tender across the nation and must be accepted. If this government wants to stop Australians using cash, then have that conversation and bring on that legislation. I understand some childcare centres are not collecting the gap fee and relying instead on the 85%, now 90% government payment as their full revenue. Taking payment for the gap in cash or any other measure and not declaring it is already illegal under the law. Not taking payment for the gap is already illegal under Section 201B, Clause 1 of a new tax system, Family Assistance Administration Act 1999. Criminal and civil penalties are provided, $12,000 per offence. Under Section 201B, subsection 1A of the same Act, the Minister can prescribe rules that could be used to ban a childcare centre from accepting cash if they are caught rorting the system. However, if they are caught rorting the system through use of cash or any other method, they lose their licence anyway through failing the fit and proper person test to work in childcare. Some welfare groups raised concerns with this provision in the committee inquiry. I suggest more would have if they were more aware the measure was hidden away in the bill. I note that the word cash is not even used. That's sneaky. The provision to ban cash payments in the entire childcare industry makes no sense if judged on the reasons the government itself states. It does make sense if the intention is to make another incremental removal of cash from common use as part of a wider agenda to force every Australian onto a central bank digital currency linked to a digital identity. Last week, the New South Wales government announced a digital identity for New South Wales, not just linked to state government paperwork, but to be used for liquor purchases. Government and the private sector working together like one big corporate state. One Nation was successful in fighting the cash ban bill in the previous parliament, with help from the Citizens Party. The Senate rejected a cash ban in 2021, and I asked the Senate to reject a cash ban again today. Countries in Europe that have tried a cash ban are now winding measures back. What makes sense to inner-city elites makes no sense at all in the real world. I foreshadow that we need to remove this provision that will stop Australians paying for their childcare gap in cash. We have one flag above this building. We are one community. We are one nation, and the King's currency cannot be refused. Minister, in addition to the previous questions, why is Labor joining the Liberal Nationals in banning cash? Your dwindling grassroots members said resoundingly last year, no, keep cash. Why are you banning cash?
Before I give the Minister the call, Senator Roberts, would you like to move your amendments?
Yes, I would. Move my amendments on sheet 1735.
Do you seek leave to move them together?
Well, they can't be moved together. They have to move separately.
We can do it either way. So
separately.
Okay. So you're moving, I think, Amendment 2
first.
On sheet 1735.
Correct.
Thank you. Minister.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Senator Roberts, for that contribution. So, the cost of early childhood education is a concern, and it's gone up by 41% over the last 8 years. And what this bill actually seeks to do is cut the cost for over 1 million families. So that is what we are doing. That is part of our plan, re-tackling the cost of living and the challenge that we inherited on that front, but also the complementary measure that we have in place to ensure that we have fairness in pricing is the government has committed $10.8 million for an ACCC inquiry to commence next year as well, to work in complementary fashion with this legislation if it hopefully passes. The ACCC will investigate the drivers of rising early education costs, and it will examine the impact of these childcare subsidy changes on out-of-pocket fees, and it will consider the effectiveness of the current mechanisms designed to put pressure on fee growth. So that is our response and how we think is the best response to tackling that challenge when it comes to cost of living and ensuring that fees are responsible. In terms of who will benefit from these changes, and if you are a family on an income of $60,000, you'll get a 90% subsidy, which is worth $14,580 a year. So that, for me, shows you the substance of the package that we put forward before the election, and what we're delivering on in government is those people on a modest income of $60,000 will be the ones who get the most subsidy as a result of these changes if we are to get them implemented. In terms of the electronic payment of gap fees, so this, from our point of view, is purely an integrity measure. The government is making a significant investment to cut the cost of childcare, but we must protect this investment from fraud and ensure families receive the benefit and that taxpayer funds are used appropriately. The bill sets out a requirement for electronic payment of gap fees. This will allow the government to test whether gap fees have been paid, and it will present a significant obstacle for fraudulent services that try to claim childcare subsidy for care that isn't occurring. So I think that for anyone who's concerned about the use of taxpayers' money and the fact that it should be used appropriately, this is an important measure that goes to tackling that problem to ensure that people can have trust in the system as well. Many key peaks and providers support this move, including Early Learning and Care Council of Australia and Outside School Hours Care Australia as well. There are many forms of electronic payment that parents can choose from which do not incur costs, and that is what we think is an appropriate way to deal with any potential fraud.
Senator Roberts.
Minister, could you tell me, please, why you haven't done the analysis already? Why is this bill being pushed without the analysis being done? You're saying we'll have the analysis next year. Why not do it now and understand the cost pressures of childcare centres? And why not do it now so we can face up to the fact that your government is putting huge cost of living pressures on people through energy policies, taxation policies and other policies already?
Minister.
Thanks, Chair. And as we've been very upfront about this from the beginning, and this is something that we talked about in opposition for many years and are committed to delivering on in government. And for us, there obviously is the economic focus of these reforms that enable more people to get back into the workforce. And for me, and I spend much time in rural and regional Australia, the workforce shortage is acute in the cities, but it's also acute in regional areas as well. So for me, this policy is one that will benefit so many communities across the country because it will enable more people to get back into the workforce, which will help ease that labour shortage that we've got in so many communities around the country. It does reduce the fees for 1 million people who'll be better off from a cost of living point of view, but for me, the longer-term economic benefits to so many communities will be widespread, and that's why this government is committed to delivering on it. It was an election promise. It also helps restore that integrity and trust with the Australian people from oppositions going to elections and promising things, but then delivering on them in government. And that's what we intend to do today.